I don't know where that Dr. Catherine went. She is always off wandering around out in the woods. So I'm here with you guys today. I'm Scrubby the Scrub Jay, and I will get us started until Dr. Catherine returns. All right, let me get her PowerPoint back up here. All right, there we go. Do you guys see the PowerPoint? Miss Cassidy, yes. Help me out. Yes, all right, excellent. So here's a little bit about Dr. Catherine. She's the Ecology and Natural Resources Educator at IFAS Extension, Sarasota County. And she does a lot of programs, including the Florida Master Naturalist program, where you can learn all sorts of things about Florida's natural environment. She does an elementary school program for kids about environmental education. And she's pretty smart. She has a couple degrees. And she gets to live in Oscar Shearer State Park, which is super cool. It's where I live too. You're gonna learn all about scrub jays at Oscar Shearer State Park. But she lives there with her husband, Tony, the park manager. Oh, he's sitting right next to me right there. He's gonna join us today to talk to you more about scrub jays. And also, they live here in Oscar Shearer with their family and a whole bunch of other animals. Here we go. There's a picture of Tony. He's a handsome man. Let me tell you a little bit about from a bird's perspective. I don't know. So let me tell you a little bit about where Dr. Catherine works at IFAS Extension. There's an extension office in all 67 counties of our state. They offer all sorts of different programming depending upon the community needs of that particular county. Here are all the programs that they have here in Sarasota. We have quite a number of programs and people to assist you in all these areas. Right now, we're working from home. You can see that I've flown into Dr. Catherine and Tony's home office to do this presentation, but we are all answering questions by phone and email, so please reach out to us if you need anything. Here are some of the programs that we offer through Sarasota County Extension. You can see that Florida Master Naturalist logo up in the upper right-hand corner. Sometimes Dr. Catherine brings people out here to visit me when they take that class. And Dr. Catherine asked me to please remind you to take the U.S. Census. If you haven't done that yet, you can take it online at census.gov. All right. Oh, I think I see Dr. Catherine coming. Give me just a minute. She's gonna take over. Hey, thanks for being here with me today, guys. I'm gonna take off my mask. Notice it has feathers all over it because even though I'm sitting right next to Park Manager Tony Clements, we have been quarantining together during COVID-19 because we are husband and wife. So that's why we're gonna have our masks off for this presentation. So this is what we're gonna talk about today. We're gonna talk about how to identify scrub jays, the biology and natural history of scrub jays. They have lots of unique adaptations that help them survive in their habitat. So we'll talk about both of those things. And we'll talk about managing for the Florida scrub jay. And this is where Tony will take over and he'll talk about the scrub jays here at Oscar Shearer State Park, like Scrubby, who you just met, and how he does land management to help the population. Then we'll mention a little bit about what you can do and where you can go to see scrub jays. And we're going to talk about banding scrub jays as well, which is really interesting. I have a cool sort of photo montage for you that shows you the process of banding scrub jays. So, and then there'll be some time for Q&A. We're going to talk for about another 50 minutes or so, I'd say, and then we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. I believe I was out of the room, but I'm pretty sure Cassidy probably mentioned to save your Q&A until the end or to type your questions into the chat box if you don't want to forget them, and then we'll get to them at the end. While you're finding your chat box to type your questions in, why don't you go ahead and type in you can just type in your first name or your initials if you've seen a scrub jay before. Go ahead and type that in. I'm really interested to see, Cassidy can tell me in a few minutes, how many of you have actually seen a scrub jay? We've got like 32 people, I believe, on today. So we'll see what percentage of you have seen scrub jays. All right, I'm going to talk for a minute. I'll let you type your name or initials in if you've seen a scrub jay, and Cassie, you can tell me at some point. So luckily we have lots of beautiful photos from people that visit here at the park. Fran Palmieri is one. There's some photos from me. We have some photos from Archibald and FWC as well. So we're gonna get to show you some really beautiful photos. And if you haven't ever seen a scrub jay, you're gonna get to see some of these photos, and then we'll talk about where you can go to see them in the future as well. So we're introducing the Florida scrub jay to you today, the only bird unique to Florida. So scrub jays are what we call, or at least Florida scrub jays, let me be very specific. Florida scrub jays are what we call endemic, because Florida scrub jays are only found here in Florida. They're found nowhere else in the world. So this map is a very rough illustration of where some of the other scrub jay species are. So there are actually two western species of scrub jays. They used to be considered one species until 2016. And now they're considered two species. The Woodhouse's scrub jay, which is more in the central part of the light blue area of the map. They're from like Nevada into Mexico. And then there's also a California scrub jay, which is more of the western side of that map, from Washington State all the way into Baja California. So two different western scrub jay species. There's an island scrub jay that's only found on Santa Cruz Island. So those are our different scrub jay species, but you'll see that our Florida scrub jay is down there in the bright blue, only found in Florida. So as I said, they're the only avian or bird species occurring only in Florida. That makes them endemic. They are non-migratory. In fact, they don't like to fly very far at all, so they do not migrate. And they're one of the most sedentary and habitat restricted birds in America. So we're going to talk about what that means for their population and for management in a little while. Scrub jays have been known to live up to 15 years. But unfortunately, they have a lot of pressures on their populations, and their numbers in many areas are declining. So they are protected by the U.S. Migratory Bird Treaty Act, as many of our birds are, but they are also federally listed as threatened. So they're protected on many different levels, both federally and state. And then we're going to talk more about threats to their population, but like much of our wildlife, especially birds, habitat loss and fragmentation due to the immense amount of development, especially here in Florida and in the habitat that scrub jays live in, are one of the main threats. And then we'll talk more about how important fire is to managing their populations, and how by suppressing fire, we have actually threatened the scrub jay population here in Florida. All right, Cassidy, how many people have seen a scrub jay?
We have about 14 people, which is almost half of us here in the Zoom meeting.
Wow. So I love it if 100% of you at some point all get to see a scrub jay. It's really fun. I'm sure Tony would say the same thing, because before COVID, he used to do scrub jay walks here at Oscar Scherer State Park every Sunday. And both of us have had the honor of sharing scrub jays for the very first time with people. And it's just so exciting. So for those of you that haven't seen a scrub jay, I wish you that gift in your future. All right, so let's figure out, if you do see a scrub jay, let's make sure you know that you are actually seeing a scrub jay. How do we identify them? Okay, well, in this picture, can you tell which of these is Scrubby, who visited us earlier, and which of them is the real scrub jay? Let me give you a hint. Scrubby is the one that's really big. So the real scrub jay is sitting on Scrubby's hand. And scrub jays are a medium-sized blue and gray bird. They are about the size of a blue jay. Scrub jays have blue wings, head and tail, and then they have a gray back and gray belly. And you can see sort of the gray belly in this picture. Part of their head is gray, but when they're adults, it's mostly blue in the back. They also sort of have that blue ring, especially as adults, they have that blue ring under their neck, as you can see in the picture there. So let's take a look, because most of us have probably seen a blue jay. Blue jays are common backyard birds. A scrub jay is not going to be a common backyard bird. So here are some of the differences. You'll notice that that neck ring on the blue jay is black, whereas on the right-hand side on the scrub jay, you see a slightly different kind of blue, and you see the blue neck ring. You also noticeably the blue jay has a crest on the top of its head, whereas a Florida scrub jay and all species of scrub jays have a flat head. They don't have those feathers that stick up in a crest. Blue jays have some wing bars, and they have some like black and white patterns on their wings. Florida scrub jays do not have that. And then blue jays have a little bit more whitish coloration to their lighter feathers, whereas the Florida scrub jay is more grayish. So those are some of the main identifying characteristics. Here's another picture that compares the wings and the back of the bird. And here you can see on the adult scrub jay, you really have a full head of blue. We're going to talk in a minute about how the juveniles don't have that full head of blue feathers initially. They develop those over their first year of life. All right, so just a little bit about their vocalizations. They have two different types of calls. They have loud calls that they use for defense, and there's a number of different types of those. And then they have more like deeper, low amplitude guttural vocalizations, and they use those in social interactions. Females do this thing that we call hicking, or we call it a hiccup, and we don't think that males make that sound. So if you hear a bird, a scrub jay, make that hiccuping sound, I can't make it. Tony, can you make it? Did you guys hear that? All right, he's good at stuff like that. Me, not so much. And Scrubby already flew off, so we can't, well, and Scrubby's a boy, so he doesn't hiccup. So Tony made those hiccuping sounds for us, or hicking sounds. Females make those noises when they are sort of stressed out or concerned. So if you watch a scrub jay for a while and they don't hiccup, you can't be absolutely sure that it's a male or a female. But if you do hear a scrub jay hicking, then you can be pretty darn sure it's a female. And then because our jay populations are sort of isolated in different patches throughout the state, their vocalizations have actually sort of changed, and they differ from each other. So sort of like there's different dialects of languages. If humans are separated by mountains, they may both speak a certain language, but a different dialect. It's similar to that. So I don't think, well, maybe. I'm going to try, I haven't tried this before, so we never know what's going to happen. So I'm going to try clicking on this link, which takes us to the Cornell Lab All About Birds website, where there are bird sounds for all different birds that you can listen to. I'm going to see if it works. Hopefully I won't blow up the computer and disappear. Or it may do nothing, we'll see. All right, let's see if you guys can hear this. Okay, so there's one type of call. They have 3 on here, so I'm going to play all of them. There's the hiccuping. Mm-hmm. All right, so there's 3 different types of calls. Do you guys still see my, here, I'm gonna have to stop sharing and share again. Ah, the wonders of Zoom in our world. Okay. Beautiful. Do you see the PowerPoint again, Cassidy?
Yes,
Thank you, Molly. I see Molly nodding for me too. Okay. So those are some of the sounds that they make. They don't really sing like some of the songbirds you might expect. They make some of those other noises that we just heard. This is what they eat. They are omnivorous, which means they eat a multitude of different things. Primarily through most of the year, they're going to eat invertebrates or insects such as grasshoppers and crickets, and they really like caterpillars. But they'll also eat, as you can see, many different things. They'll eat spiders, frogs, lizards, small snakes, mice, berries. So quite a variety of diet, although mostly they're going to eat insects and other invertebrates, except in the fall and winter, which is when they eat mostly acorns. And what's amazing to me, I've said this fact so many times, and yet I'm still so astounded by it. Florida scrub jays bury between 6,500 and 8,000 acorns every year. And then they manage to somehow know where they are and go back and recover up to 75% of those. That's like 6,000, like 5,000 to 6,000 that they then go back and eat later. I don't know. Could you remember?
I don't even remember where I put my car keys in the morning, so that's pretty good.
All right, and here's some of the things that will eat scrub jays. So when scrub jays are eggs or they're still in the nest as little babies, things like snakes and squirrels, raccoons, foxes, bobcats, crows, owls, and hawks. Basically anything that can either climb into the nest or fly into the nest and grab an egg or a small baby is going to be able to unfortunately predate on the baby scrub jays or eggs. But juveniles and adult predators, that's going to be more like larger snakes, bobcats, hawks, owls, and then unfortunately automobiles. Because although scrub jays don't like to fly very far, we have built lots and lots of roads. So if they're in an area where they might try to fly from one place to another that is dissected by a road, they actually fly at about 6 feet usually. So they fly sort of at the level of where an automobile is going to be. So unfortunately, automobiles are a cause of death for our scrub jays. They have all sorts of defensive measures that they can take to defend themselves. We're going to talk about what a Sentinel J is in a few minutes, but it's basically a jay that's watching out for the rest of the family. They will sit at a tall tree, and if they see anything in the sky, like a hawk or an owl, they'll give an alarm call, and then all the rest of the family will dive for cover. If they see a predator on the ground, like a snake, they use a different call so that the rest of the family knows to not dive towards the ground, but to move elsewhere away from that snake. And like we see with our blue jays, scrub jays also practice a behavior called mobbing, where they will all just sort of bother the heck out of a predator. So you may have seen crows do this, which are in the same family as blue jays and scrub jays. You may have seen blue jays do this, where if there's a hawk or an owl or even an osprey, a bunch of the jay family or the crow family members will all follow it around and yell at it and scream at it and fly at it, trying to get it to move out of its territory. So let's talk about mating behavior. Florida scrub jays reach sexual maturity around 2 to 3 years old. Prior to this, they're going to stay around with the family and they're going to help their parents. So we'll talk about that in a minute too. When they do form successful mating pairs, they mate for life. So they're permanently monogamous. And before they can nest, they need to sort of own a territory. So this is when you're going to see scrub jays moving. Like I said, they don't move very far, but this is when they're going to try to move and find their own territory so that mated pair can nest. They do a lot better with human beings when it comes to picking a mate. So the divorce rate for Florida scrub jays is only 6%. Although if they live in more of a suburban area, it's a little higher, it's 15%. And even though there are small groups and they live in family groups, inbreeding is very rare. At Archbald Biological Station, where a lot of this research has been done, they looked at 960 pairs of scrub jays over time, and there were only 3 instances of mother-son pairing and absolutely no instances of father-daughter pairing. So that helps to maintain the genetics. Here's a scrub jay nest. So scrub jays will nest February through June. Most scrub jays, or 55% of the ones studied, actually nested in March, and then it goes down from there. So 41% in April, and then very few nests later in the season. They like to build their nest in some of the scrub oaks that we'll talk about, which are the shorter oaks found in scrub environments. Or under vines and clumps of leaves. They like their nest to be about 3 to 6 feet above the ground in these short oaks. Both the male and female help to build the nest, but the female spends the most time building the cup, which is what you see here. In this picture, you see the cup, or the inside of the nest, and it has been woven out of palmetto fibers, which gives it a nice soft inner lining. And so the female does that last bit of nesting to make that nice and soft for the eggs. Let's see. They only use natural fibers. They don't pick up paper or plastic to incorporate into their nests. And their nests are about 8 inches in diameter in total, but that middle part, the cup, is about 3 inches in diameter. Let's see. Eggs are greenish with brownish spots that are concentrated near the larger end of the egg. I couldn't find a good picture of an egg to show you guys. Eggs are laid 1 per day for a total of 2 to 5 eggs. The average size clutch is 4. Eggs are usually laid in the morning, and then the incubation of those eggs starts after they are all laid. And it's about 18 to 20 days later, the eggs all usually hatch on the same day. And if for some reason the nest fails, like something goes wrong with the nesting process or the egg laying process, the scrub jay pair will rebuild the nest in a different site, and they will retry again about 10 days later. There's some baby scrub jays. Oh, they're super cute. When I show this picture to kids, they're all like, ew, because they don't think they're so cute. So obviously they're born naked with their eyes closed. They're totally dependent on their parents. They hatch, as I said, usually 8 days after they're laid. They're fed mostly animal protein, so primarily insects like caterpillars. And that just gives them more protein. Acorns have protein as well, but they're really high in carbohydrates, and berries are pretty much carbohydrates. So when we're growing babies, just like us humans, when we're moms, we need to eat a lot of protein, and the jays feed their babies a lot of protein-rich caterpillars. The male, female, and the helpers from the previous years will help feed, although interestingly, the males help feed more than the females. I guess the females get to take a little bit of break, and the males get to do the feeding. And this was amazing to me. They are fed up to 14 times an hour. So those of you on this call that are moms, just imagine feeding your newborn babies 14 times an hour. You dads can imagine that too, but us moms usually for humans really understand what that would mean. So 14 times per hour, pretty much all day long, except in the mid-afternoon, they take a little bit of a break and they're fed a little less often, like about 7 times an hour. Pretty amazing. There's a picture of one of the helper jays feeding an insect. That's a juvenile jay that we see in the picture. And down on the bottom right-hand corner is a helper jay, which is like a teenager jay, and it's feeding the jay from this year. And you can see that little tiny insect in the beak that's about to go into the juvenile's mouth. So here's a juvenile or a fledgling. So the baby birds fledge about 18 days after hatching. They are independent at about 85 days. So they're still, even if they fledge out of the nest, meaning they start to learn to fly, they're still going to be dependent on the family group for a while. So this is a typical juvenile. They can be distinguished from adults by that grayish brown head. They don't have that circle or necklace around their neck. You can almost see like a shadowing here in this picture, but it will not turn blue until they're about a year old. And then what they do is, if you've seen birds that are transitioning from the juvenile to mature stage, they often look a little rough. They'll start losing some of their downy feathers. Our scrub jays are going to start growing in a few blue feathers here and there, and they look a little motley for a little bit of time. There's another young or juvenile scrub jay. So nesting is only successful about 50% of the time. Oh, sorry, and there's a little right there where it says first year, 35%. So about 35% of the young birds make it through their first year. You lose a lot of those birds in that first year. 80% of those that make it through that first year are then going to survive once they reach adulthood. So it's like many of our animals, it's really the eggs in that first year that are the most serious losses in the population. So these are sort of generalized numbers, but these numbers will drastically be based on the quality of habitat that the scrub jays are in. So there might, if it's a better quality habitat, we might see a higher percentage of survival, whereas if it's low quality habitat, they may not make it through at all. And the statistics indicate that it takes about 2.2 fledglings per year for a mated pair to maintain a stable population. So Tony's going to talk to us in just a few minutes more about population and trying to manage the population, but we really need scrub jays to be replacing themselves every year and for those birds to survive if we want them to continue into the future. So a few adaptations, some of which we've already talked about. We already mentioned that scrub jays mate for life. They live in a family group, and we call them cooperative breeders. And this is a survival adaptation because they help each other out. That way, the taking care of the young isn't all just on the adult birds. So they will live in families of 2 to 8 birds, where the juveniles and the young adults from the year or sometimes even 2 years previous will stay in the family group and help the mating pair to actually feed and take care of the babies. And so they spread that work around. They live in the same area all year, and they are very territorial. They will defend their territory. And their territory will be an average of about 25 acres of habitat. Here's our Sentinel J. So this is what I was mentioning earlier. One of those family members at a time will take over being the sentinel, and they will stay at one of the higher perches in the scrub oak, and they will watch out both up in the air and on the ground, and they will watch for any types of threats or predators and then make those different vocalizations to communicate to the family group when they need to be careful. They are very curious and smart. They know who's in their territory, and they will come and look at us when we're wandering through their territory. Of course, we want to keep the jays safe. We don't ever want to feed a jay. Tony will mention more about that. But we want them to stay safe and wild. So they may come and take a look at us, and you want to take a look at them, but please don't feed them or try to get them to come to you. We mentioned their unique survival adaptation of just having an amazing memory for where they cache all of those acorns. And scrub jays live only in a very specific habitat. It's predominantly going to be oak scrub with sandy soils. And here are the optimal habitat requirements. They like those trees and shrubs in their habitat to only be about 1 to 2 meters high, as I mentioned earlier, and they want about 60% of their habitat to be those short, scrubby oaks. They need about 20% of their habitat to be open ground, which is going to be the sandy soils of the scrub, because this is where they're going to bury those acorns in the scrub. And they want no more than 20% of pines and taller trees in their habitat, because that's a place where predators can perch. Overgrown scrub with too many trees usually has those increased number of predators, and scrub overgrows when fire is suppressed. So historically, fire maintained scrub would burn every 5 to 20 years, and this is a really important management technique for scrub that Tony will talk about in a moment. So here's one of those lower trees, and you can see there aren't a lot of taller trees in the foreground or middle ground of this area. So there is a gentleman standing there, one of our Scrub Jay researchers, and you can see how short those scrubby oaks are. And we have a variety of scrubby oak species in Florida. You can also see some of that open sandy ground. Here in Oscar Shearer, we have more what we call scrubby flatwoods. There are a number of different types of scrub habitat. We have mostly scrubby flatwoods, and that's sort of a combination of traditional sort of oak scrub with some of the pine flatwoods. There's the scrubby oaks that produce acorns for the scrub jays to eat. We need those open patches of sand. And I am now going to turn it over to Tony Clements, the Oscar Shearer Park Manager. And also he has a Scrub Jay working group, and he is going to talk to y'all more about managing scrub for scrub jays.
Hey folks, thank you very much. Welcome to Oscar Shearer State Park virtually. Managing the scrub. So these are some of the challenges that we have specific to Oscar Shearer State Park. One of the big issues for the in regards to the Florida scrub jay and its habitat that it lives in is an isolated population. The nearest scrub habitat to us is about 10 miles away, and we just learned that the scrub jays don't like to travel more than a couple miles to find new habitat. So that's one strike against the Florida scrub jays here. The big issue with that is genetics. Of course, if you've got an isolated population of anything, you don't have a good genetic pool to pull from, and you're not going to have much success with breeding and whatnot. Also, lack of habitat. Even though Oscar Shearer State Park is 1,400 acres, only 421 acres of that habitat is suitable for the Florida scrub jay, is that scrubby habitat. And there's not enough. You need about, they say, anywhere from 800 to 1,000 acres of scrub, and that scrub needs to be in pretty good shape in order to have enough habitat for a self-sustaining population of Florida scrub jays. Also, Oscar Shearer State Park is continually being developed on its borders. So within 1 year, we will be completely surrounded by development, which will add to that isolation issue. And also, when these areas are developed, many of those wildlife that live in that area, including the predators, need a place to live. So guess where they're moving into? They're moving into Oscar Shearer State Park. So the neighborhood's getting busy. There's a lot of folks moving in. It also makes it a lot harder for us to utilize the best tools that we have out there to keep that habitat in good shape. So it's hard for us to do that resource management, apply that prescribed fire. Our windows are much tighter because we are surrounded by development. Because of course, before we do any burning, we want to make sure safety is paramount. Also in the past 6 years, our visitation has doubled. So there's more people out looking for those scrub jays and out on the trails, and that can also help with the diminishing of the numbers. So if you were to trend out the population of Florida scrub jays in Sarasota County, we could lose the whole population within 5 to 10 years. So that's a little bit of a wake-up call as far as I'm concerned. And it's a unique species to Florida, so we need to do everything we can to make sure that we can see these jays persist. And that's what we do here at Oscar Scherer State Park. So some of the tools we use, some of the ways that we keep those jays here and keep this habitat healthy, so we've got a viable population, is we will create some of those bare sandy patches that the jays need. Sometimes due to lack of fire and other reasons, those bare sandy patches can fill in. So we do that through sometimes heavy machinery, and sometimes we just go out there and treat some of the grasses and other herbaceous plants that are growing within those bare sandy openings. We also thin pines. One of the things that happens with lack of fire is you'll get more pines in an area. Again, we want about 2 to 3 pine trees per acre, because guess who's hanging out in those pine trees? That's where the owls and the sharp-shinned hawks and the Cooper's hawks, all those predators are hanging out in there. So these jays want to live in a safe neighborhood. So a safe neighborhood for the jays is a neighborhood with not too many big, large trees in it. Also pushing back, again, that 400 and some acres of scrub that we have, pushing back the boundaries, because again, scrub is always in flux, it's always changing. And if you don't reintroduce fire back into that scrub, it's not going to get the way that we want it to get for the jay. So we push back that hardwood encroachment. We push back those areas so we've got more scrub available to them. Jays also don't like to fly over or through things. They like a nice open spot. They need to see exactly where they're going. They need to see if there's any predators in the way. So we remove some of those barriers so that jays have open access and clear access to that scrub habitat. And again, the #1 tool that we can use is prescribed fire to get the jay's habitat looking good, because that's something that's been going on for thousands of years. Also removing a lot of those non-native species, because in those bare sandy places, some grasses like to grow. So one of the big ones is Bahia grass. You see that encroaching into a lot of our scrub habitat. So we'll go in and treat that to keep that out of that area. So we get rid of that seed source. Scrub habitat is built on the old ancient dune system. So if you can imagine Florida being a big giant sand dune, and the center of Florida is a big giant sand dune, and that's where the jays are. It's living on these well-drained sandy soils. So we have less than 6% of scrub remaining in Florida and less than 3% left in Sarasota County. And the reason being, if you're going to build a house, do you want to build it in a swamp? Or do you want to build it somewhere high and dry with well-drained soil? Guess where you're building your house? High and dry and well-drained soil. These scrub jays know what they're doing. So we've lost a lot of this habitat because it's a perfect place to develop. And it's also a perfect place to grow citrus. Oranges are not native to Florida. And oranges and citrus likes to grow in that well-drained soil too. So we've lost a lot of the scrub habitat for the agricultural purposes of growing citrus. Again, wildfires. We've been starting fires in Florida for thousands and thousands of years. And when we do prescribed fires, all we're doing is mimicking that natural process that's been going on for thousands of years. These native plants and animals have learned to adapt and survive with this fire. So we got to make sure that we're reintroducing the fire. And every different type of habitat has a different what we call fire return interval, depending on if it's fire dependent or not. And scrub jays are very much fire critical, I would say. So burning is the best tool we can use to restore that habitat, to reset that clock so the Florida scrub jays will always have good habitat. And we do that in pieces, so we don't burn the whole habitat at once. We want to do it in sections so those jays always have a new place to move to until that habitat grows up, which typically takes about a year or two to get that habitat suitable for the jays again. Again, urban interface is a big issue for us to do that resource management, just for us to do the burning, because that smoke has to go somewhere, and we don't want to smoke out 75 or 681 or our neighbors. So we've got very tight windows on those prescriptions that we write for each one of the management zones. We've got 52 management zones here at Oscar Scherer State Park, and we've got 52 prescriptions, one prescription for each of those management zones. So scrub habitat typically burns of winds maybe 20, 30 miles an hour when the humidity's maybe 20, 30%. There's no way we could safely manage a prescribed fire in the scrub in such an urban interface here at Oscar Scheer State Park. So one of the tools that we use is we've got to reduce those fuels down to a manageable level where we can burn it maybe on a 10-mile-an-hour wind when the humidity is at 40%. That way we can manage it under those conditions. So us doing the resource management is a great tool for us to get the burning done under safer conditions. Before we take a machine like this out into the zone, we make sure we don't do it during nesting season. We don't usually do it during the acorn mass when the acorns are reproducing. We typically will go out, we always go out and we check the whole zone and we mark off any gopher tortoise burrows or any sensitive areas out there so the operator of the machine knows to stay away from that area. So we're not taking away the fuels, we're changing the vertical arrangement so fire can more easily bypass and pass through that area and still get reach the same results that we would with a wildfire or something like that. Another important thing about prescribed fire is not only does it create great habitat for the native plants and animals that are fire dependent, but it reduces those fuel loads. We typically get about 3 to 4 lightning strikes here at Oscar Scheer State Park. So when we do get those lightning strikes, because we've been doing that prescribed fire on a fire return interval, the fires are much less intense and we can manage them and they're not as devastating to those habitats. So when I'm managing for sprays for Florida scrub jays at Oscar Scheer, I'm looking to hit some marks. So I want about 20% bare sandy openings. I want about 2 to 3 pine trees per acre. I want that scrub, and the way that scrub jays like it is about 3 to 6 feet tall. So I consider we manage the Florida scrub jay as what we call an umbrella species. That's why you see an umbrella in this. So that means if you've got Florida scrub jays in there and they're doing well, that means all those other species, both plants and animals, are also doing well in that habitat, like the gopher frog, the indigo snake. All those species are doing well because the scrub jays are doing well. Same with, wonder why Goldilocks is here. Well, Goldilocks is on the slide because the scrub jays are very, very picky. They don't like the habitat too short. They don't like it too tall. They like it just right. And again, just right is about 3 to 6 feet tall. The only way you're going to keep it at that height is by keeping your prescribed fires in that fire return interval. Scrub typically burns anywhere from 6 to 10 to 15 years. You're going to reburn it. Here's some examples of some overgrown scrub. You can see a lot of that scrub's really, really tall. That's probably about 12-foot tall scrub. On the picture to your right, that's got sand pines in it, and those sand pines will grow up pretty quick and overtake an area. So again, this is all due to lack of fire. And sometimes you've got to go in and do some restoration work before you can reintroduce fire into these places. So this is good height. Again, within that 3 to 6 to 7 feet height range is where the scrub jays like it. They're going to do well in there. That's the sweet spot for the Florida scrub jay. A lot of people say, well, you know, Florida scrub jays, that's great. But what about us humans? You know, we're kind of egocentric. So us humans, this scrub is really important to us too, because in many of the habitats in Florida, there's a clay layer under the soil. So when it rains, the water percolates, hits that clay layer, and just sits there. Not so much in the scrub. The scrub is like a huge coffee filter. So when it rains, the water percolates through that sand, and guess where it ends up? The Florida aquifer. Guess where we get a lot of our drinking water? The Florida aquifer. So these scrub type habitats are great places to recharge that Florida aquifer, and not only recharge it, but also filter that water before it ends up in those aquifers. So it's really important for us humans also. So we've talked about this Florida scrub jay likes this as a homebody. It doesn't like to disperse very far. Typically 2 to 3 miles is as far as a jay will move, unless it's got nowhere else and it might try to make a trek 10 miles or so. But typically they're going to stay in the same area. They're going to, when those young, maybe after a year or so and they're ready to look for territory of their own, they're going to stay pretty close. Maybe they'll go over maybe a 1/4 mile and find a territory there. So at Oscar Scheer State Park, again, we have very, very little habitat left. So there's not very many places for them to disperse. Again, the nearest place to Oscar Scheer State Park is over 10 miles away. So that's another strike. Another thing that's really hard for these jays, because they're very, very picky birds. They only live in scrub habitat and then only live and persist in scrub habitat that's being maintained either naturally by fire, wildfires, or by prescribed fires and other means. So here's just to get some numbers. So a Florida Scrub Jay family or territory will consist of about 20 to 25 acres, okay? We have 400 and some acres here, 462 acres of scrub. So if you, about 1/4 of that 462 acres is in some type of maintenance. Either it's too tall and we're getting ready to apply fire to it. We've just applied fire to it. So it's gonna take about a year or two for that to provide good habitat for the jays again. Or we've just roller chopped it and it's going to be burned. So you take 1/4 of that away. Let's say it gets us down to about 400 acres. Okay, and then you do the math. Let's say 20 into 400, and then so we can support about 10 to 15 families of Florida Scrub Jays at Oscar Scheer State Park. And that's if all the planets aligned, we didn't have an increase of predators, we had other areas for these jays to disperse to, which we really don't. So we know the jays don't have much of a fighting chance here, but us as land managers are restoring every square inch of scrub habitat that we have at Oscar Scheer State Park, and also working with other landowners in the area to look at corridors or even stepping stones. So maybe a jay here can travel from here and get down to Lemon Bay Park. And the way that they do that is along the Venice Intercoastal. They're working on a Venice urban park forest along the intercoastal, and they're working on putting scrub habitat back into that area. So the jays will now have a way of dispersing. And it's amazing. I don't know if these jays have like scrub jay Tinder or whatever, but they'll move from, the jays will somehow know that there's habitat elsewhere and they'll go and find that habitat. We've had jays leave Oscar Scheer that have gone to Lemon Bay or Shamrock Park, and vice versa. Jays from there have come to us. So we know they do use those routes. So we're trying to find out where we have all the remaining scrub within Sarasota County and Charlotte and Manatee County, and ways that we can identify, figure out who the owners are, where the jays are, so we can try to see that these jays will persist into the future. Little history. So in 1988, we had no Florida Scrub Jays at Oscar Scheer State Park. We started restoring the areas, brought fire back into it, reduced the hardwoods, reduced the pines. 1990, we had one family. In 91, we acquired another 991 acres. And the reason we acquired that is because it had scrub habitat and it had scrub jays on it. So our numbers went up to 12. So in 1999 was our heyday. We had 35 families, 109 jays. Now we talked about our carrying capacity here. That's way too many jays than we can support here. So the jays, instead of mating, they were busy fighting and bickering over territory. And then ever since then, the numbers have gone down, 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 down. As you can see, in 2015-16, we had 5 families remaining and 12 Florida Scrub Jays. So the numbers have gone down. Currently, we have 7 families. We have 23 to 25 jays. In fact, last year was the first year in 20 years that we had an increase in families. So that's some good news. We're seeing a little bit of an increase, but we know we don't have enough acreage here to have a self-sustaining population. We've got a lot of strikes against us, but that's not going to stop us doing everything that we can to make sure these jays are around for future generations. That's one of our missions with the Florida Park Service and as land managers, is to make sure that future generations have the ability to see these jays that we see now. Again, just a graph kind of showing the population trends. You can see those spikes went up and it's been a steady decline. Again, over the last few years, you can see those numbers have been slowly creeping up. And you know, our goal is to try to make the jays as sustainable as possible, even though we've got all these struggles and challenges that we're fighting against. So how can you help? The first thing you can do is don't feed the Florida Scrub Jays. And one of the reasons you don't want to feed Florida Scrub Jays is jays that are fed will breed earlier and it'll have less success of those eggs becoming young chicks and fledging, because naturally these jays will lay their eggs and those eggs will hatch exactly the same time that there's an abundance of a certain type of caterpillar. If you feed them, they're going to breed earlier, and that high protein food source is not going to be available for them. So don't feed the jays, even though they're very friendly birds, very gregarious. And support local restoration efforts. You know, become a volunteer. Keep your cats inside. It's amazing how many birds cats can take, especially if you live in areas adjacent to scrub habitat. Learn more, take the time to learn more about the Florida scrub jay and its habitat, and tell others about this really amazing, unique bird that we have and we can only find here in Florida. Become a volunteer at an area such as Oscar Scheer State Park or a local park in your area, and get your hands dirty and make a difference. At Oscar Scheer State Park, we do have a Adopt a Florida Scrub Jay program. You can't take one home with you, but you can symbolically adopt a jay, and you'll get a picture of a jay, and you kind of follow how its life is going. And all that money goes directly into Florida Scrub Jay resource management. All right, Catherine's going to take over, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about Jay Watch, another way that you can become a volunteer and help out specifically for Florida Scrub Jays.
All right, so Jay Watch is a citizen science program, and it is coordinated by Audubon, Florida. If you have participated in Jay Watch at all, go ahead and type your name into the chat box. I'd be really interested to see if any of you have gotten the joy of doing Jay Watch. So I participated for the first time a couple years ago, and basically what happens is you go to a training, and this can be anyone. I did it when I first started at Extension because I hadn't had the opportunity to do it prior to that, but anyone can do this. It's for the public. So if you want to volunteer, you sign up to do a training. The training is usually offered in the early to late spring. It's usually about a 4 to 5 hour training, and they offer it in multiple locations throughout the state. I did mine at Duet Preserve in Manatee County. And then you learn in that training, you learn a lot of the same stuff that we've shared about scrub jays with you today, but you also learn how to monitor them, how to go out into their habitat, watch for them, and then identify them, and then how to take the data correctly so that then that can be shared with our Audubon, Florida state office, and then they collaborate or they put together all of those numbers, and we get an annual report on not only the numbers of scrub jays at the locations where these surveys are done, but also we learn a lot about their behavior and what's happening with them over the years. So there are 49 sites in 19 different counties where these surveys are done, and the numbers are amazing. I mean, I'm always amazed by what volunteers are capable of doing and all of the work that they do in all of our natural resource areas. So in just 2018 alone, 269 volunteers invested almost 3,000 hours in on-site trainings and performing these field surveys across the state. Here's just a map of in 2018 where the survey sites were. So we do have a number of them in Sarasota County. If you're if you're joining us today from Sarasota County, there's some in Manatee County, also in Charlotte. So if you're interested in this, you have quite the opportunity to do this. I know this past year because of COVID, I can't remember exactly what happened. I think they did some online trainings, and then did just the land managers do the surveys, Tony, or did they still have volunteers do them? Do you know?
Mostly land managers.
Yeah, so mostly the land managers, just because of our situation with COVID, ended up doing those surveys this year, but hopefully next year we'll be in a different situation and volunteers will be able to help with those surveys again. They do the surveys between June 15th and July 15th. It's usually the land managers of the area where the surveys are held that determine what days. The surveys are usually done 3 days in a row, so that you can go out and you can return to that the same different location points in a given site 3 days in a row to look for scrub jays. Sometimes you're working with the land managers and you're going out with them, which is really a neat experience because you usually get to learn all sorts of other stuff when that happens. But sometimes you're also going out independently, if you're comfortable with that, to some of the sites. Here's the data sheet that you fill out when you do JWatch. So there's always there's survey points that are already predetermined. And those are either GPSed or marked in some way, or you go out with a land manager that knows where they are. You look for predators, and then you go through a special process that helps to call the scrub jays in towards you, which you would never do in any other circumstance, because, and this is why we look for predators first, you don't want to bring the scrub jays to you. That's not a natural sort of thing that should happen. But in the case of monitoring them so that we can learn about their population, how best to support them, we do use that process. And that's done through specific instructions by the program and biologists. And then if any scrub jays do come, you record information about them. So here's a group of scrub jay volunteers that are out looking and monitoring for scrub jays. So one of the first questions I asked when I started thinking about volunteering and doing JWatch was, well, how in the world do I identify a scrub jay? They all look alike to me. How do I know that scrub jay A is different from scrub jay B? So let's take you on a little journey of learning how to do that. So how would you identify the scrub jay? Of course, one of the first things you probably notice about this is those bright colored bands on the legs of the scrub jay, and that is indeed how we identify them. We band birds of all different species to learn information about them. There's bands of all different sizes to fit on all different birds that live in different types of habitats. But banding scrub jays is one of the best ways to learn about them and be able to identify them. So notice what colors are on the right leg of the scrub jay. Notice what colors are on the left leg. Because you're going to look for bands on both legs. Usually with the scrub jays I've seen, there's always bands on both legs, but it may be possible that there's only bands on one leg. Because of course the bands can also fall off, even if there were bands on both legs at one point. So when you're identifying this scrub jay, you're going to look at their right leg first. So you have to sort of think about the position the bird's in and figure out which is their right leg, because they may have their back to you, or they may be sort of sideways, or one leg may be hidden in the leaves. They don't always be so nice as to display their legs for you, but you try to see their right leg, and then you read the color of the bands on their right leg from top to bottom. Then you look at their left leg and also read the color of the bands from top to bottom. And then if you were to write that down, you would put a dash between the different legs. So I'll explain that a little bit better in a second. Also, all scrub jays will have a silver band. It may be on either leg in any position. And that's a federally issued band from the USGS Bird Banding Lab. And each of those bands has a unique 9-digit number that's stamped on the band that also helps to identify the bird to people that either unfortunately might find a dead bird, then they can report that. And that number will identify which bird it is, or for bird banders that might recapture the bird to learn more information. So here are the colors of the bands. They aren't always this easy to see or this obvious, but let's go back to our scrub jay. So here's a closer up picture. So this scrub jay would be named green, silver, dash, green, blue. So right leg first from top to bottom, then a dash, then left leg from top to bottom. You can see that silver band on there from the USGS. And we'll look at one other one. So here's another bird. So figure out which is his right leg and which is his left. So that lighter blue band is called azure. So he or she is going to be named azure, silver, red, blue. Okay, or azure, silver, dash, red, blue. So you can use those abbreviations if you're actually doing JWatch, or you can just say the words if you're learning how to identify them. So I'm just going to take you, this will take about 2 minutes and then we're almost done. and it'll be time for Q&A. I'm going to take you through a little photo journey of banding a Florida Scrub Jay. These photos were taken by our daughter, who got to go out when David Gordon from Quest Ecology was here at the park banding a Scrub Jay, and she took a bunch of pictures for us to look at. So Scrub Jays don't just fly to you and say, hey, put some pretty jewelry on my legs. No, you have to train them to come into a trap, and obviously a live trap. And once again, they're very curious. And so the biologists and the volunteers at the park will train them over a couple days or weeks to come to the trap. And then once they're in the trap, our certified bird bander, this is actually David Gordon right here, a certified bird bander then retrieves them from the trap. And here he is. You can see him holding the Scrub Jay there, and he has a little hood made out of really soft flannel, and you put that over the Scrub Jay's head so that they are less stressed out and less anxious about what's going on. They calm right down. So you can see he's got his other hand in a box with some different color bands in it. So here he's getting ready to put a band on the Jay, and Tony is in the background there with our volunteer Francis, who's taking notes. So here it's hard to see, but in David's left hand, he's got the little pliers that are specifically made to put the band on the bird's leg. There's a better shot of the pliers. So he's squeezing those bands tight. Well, not really tight. They do actually move like bracelets or jewelry on the leg, but they're squeezing it closed. And so there you see, you got the silver band from the USGS, and probably that looks like maybe a red band or a hot pink band. And there's the other leg. So this bird now has all of its jewelry before they release it. So they usually put the jewelry on first so that that really important step is done. And then before they release the Scrub Jay, they're going to take all sorts of measurements, because then if this bird is captured again, they can remeasure, they can sort of track the growth and health of the bird. They do try to band these birds as juveniles, because that's the only way to really know how old they are easily. So this one looks like it's almost a full adult, because I see the blue head, but they'll take all sorts of measurements that will be identified with this bird. Measuring the head, the beak, they measure the wings, and now our bird is ready to be released. So very carefully holding the bird, ready to release it. There is one of our AmeriCorps volunteers who got to release the Scrub Jay, and away it goes back to its habitat. All right, last couple slides. So here are some places where if you haven't seen a Scrub Jay and you want to try to go see one, of course, here at Oscar Scherer State Park, this is the largest population in Sarasota County according to Jay Watch. There are jays at Shamrock Park, Casperson's Beach, Deer Prairie Creek, South Venice Lemon Bay Preserve, which I do scrub walks at when we are not in COVID. Buchan Airport, and then a couple places that historically we had Scrub Jays in our county, but we either haven't done a survey there or haven't found any in the last few years. Down that last bullet indicates some other places outside of Sarasota County where there are larger populations of Scrub Jay, so those are some great places to go as well. So Tony's just going to finish up with a few comments.
Well, right now, we know that the Florida Scrub Jays still have a fighting chance, and we need to do everything we can to, especially as Floridians, to do what we can to make sure this bird survives. And I just wanted to show you two species that have already are no longer on this planet. They're extinct, and we're doing everything that we can to make sure that the Florida Scrub Jay still has a fighting chance to survive.
Here are some resources. Maybe Cassidy, you can quick just copy and paste these into the chat box. That way you can't click on them on the screen, but if they're in the chat box and you want to go back to these at a later date, just go ahead and click on them now so that they're in your browser. FWC, the Cornell All About Birds, and Fish and Wildlife Service all have great information. And of course, a lot of this information, in fact, almost all of it, we have learned through research that's been done at Archibald Biological Station. So we both want to thank you, and I'll thank you on behalf of Scrubby the Scrub Jay too for coming out and learning more with us. There's my email. Feel free to reach out to me anytime if you have any questions. Cassidy, before you leave, Cassidy is going to copy and paste the survey link into the chat box as well. We really ask you, for those of you attending the webinar in person live right now, to please take our survey. It's take you like probably a minute at the most. It's just about 7 questions, I think. It just helps us to continue to do quality programming for you, to know how you feel about our programs and how we can serve you better in the future. And for those of you that will watch this in the future on YouTube, please, there will be a survey link in the description box on YouTube. So please fill out your survey. All right, fabulous. Well, we will see you hopefully at our next webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today and for caring about Scrubby and our Florida Scrub Jays. Have a lovely day. Stay safe and healthy.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.